missed the change. Thank you. So we will start with roll call. Oh, these are the minutes.
Chair Young,
Here.
Commissioner Armstrong,
Here.
Commissioner Bowley,
Present.
Commissioner Cohen,
Here.
Commissioner Caldonado,
Present.
Commissioner Delatorre is currently absent, Commissioner Diaz,
Here.
Commissioner Goodman,
Here.
Commissioner Lamorte,
Lamort. Here.
Vice Chair Navarro is currently absent, and Commissioner Pace. Absent.
Absent.
Thank you.
Thank you. A report on the posting of the agenda, please.
In accordance with policy, the agenda was posted at Palm Springs City Hall, the Palm Springs Leisure Center, and the City of Palm Springs website last Wednesday.
Thank you very much. If you would all comment on the minutes, you all have copies. Are there any changes required, or can we entertain a motion to accept the minutes? Yes, Commissioner Goodman.
I have on page, they're not numbered, but
Yeah,
if
they are.
we,
Top.
left, they're numbered? Thank you. Let's see, top left. Are they? That's where my staple is. Minutes, page 8. Thank you. And 3/4 of the way down, where it says Chair Young said that this would be time for an ad hoc committee consisting of Commissioner Goodman, Vice Chair Navarro, and Commissioner Pace to get together. It might have gotten missed, but Alan Bowley joined that committee.
Yes,
And so I'd like that to be added.
with that correction, thank you.
And I'm not a great proofreader. It's not my strong suit. But on minutes, page 6, number 2, discussion on date and time for Commissioner's Retreat. I think it's 1, 2, 3, all the way down, master plan. It says mate plan. I think that's supposed to be master plan.
Master. Correct.
Thank you.
Any other corrections? Yes, Commissioner Armstrong.
Well, I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting, but the attendance is not correct on these minutes in terms of the present to date numbers.
Meetings missed and so forth.
I think I agree with that with mine.
Yeah, I think yours and ours are wrong for sure.
Yeah.
Can we have an audit done of those? We can tell by the presence of the minutes, but if we can get back with each of the individuals, just so that we have an individual conversation with them, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Armstrong. Any other notes or corrections or changes? If not, can we have a motion? Move to with the corrections and a second?
I'll second.
So that's Lamort and Bowley. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And abstention? 2.
Oh, abstain.
3. So we're good. 5, 0, and 3. Were you not here last time, or?
Correct.
Before we go on to correspondence, I want to take a minute and introduce Cynthia Alvarado via a bio. Cynthia is going to be working with us as Director of Parks and Recs. We're really excited to have you, Cynthia. Let me tell you a little bit about Cynthia's background. Cynthia Alvarado Crawford was raised in Lompoc, California. She attended Cuesta College. Did I say that right? Mm-hmm. Where she received her AA degree and was part of the women's swim team for 2 years. After Cuesta, she transferred to Cal State Long Beach, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in Recreation Administration with a certificate in therapeutic recreation in 2005. After graduation, she was hired by the City of San Bernardino Parks and Recreation Department to be their recreation therapist for the Center for Individual Development, focusing on providing quality programs to the disabled community. A few years into her career, she was then promoted to CID manager, where she expanded her oversight to budget preparation and management, putting on special event fundraisers and working cohesively with the nonprofit Friends of CID. The summer of 2013, she decided to further her education, and she returned to school to obtain her master's degree in business administration. She graduated in the spring of 2015. She was then promoted to Community Recreation Manager, where she provides oversight to the Recreation Division, which was made up of 5 community centers, citywide special events, youth sports, and facility rentals, and more. In January of 2017, she was then again promoted to Deputy Director of the department. Her scope of services continue to provide oversight for the Recreation Division, along with also providing support to other divisions in their department, the Administration, Parks, and Community Services. So, Cynthia, I am excited to be working with you, and welcome aboard. Thank you. What I'd like all the commissioners to do is just take a minute, introduce yourself, maybe how long you've been on the commission and what you're working on. This is going to be a learning opportunity, and hopefully you'll all get a chance to give her a call and get to meet her and talk with her personally. It's been a wonderful experience just doing that already, so thank you. Charles, if you'll start.
Hi, welcome. I'm Charlie Lamort. I've been here since July 1st, so this is my 7th month. I'm on one ad hoc committee, and that's for the hiking issue that we're dealing with. I'm also on the subcommittee on how to improve the bathrooms in our parks, and I'm an avid advocate for dogs. So welcome.
Mr. Boley.
Hi there. My name's Alan Boley. I've been on the commission, I think, 2.5 years. Currently, I'm on the committee for the retreat. The downtown park subcommittee served on that with Les and the rest of the group on that. And there's another one I'm on it. Oh, the restrooms of the park. I've been working with that one with Charlie and the rest of the group.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jody Diaz. I've been on the commission for, I don't know, 1.5 years or 2, somewhere in there. I'm on the ad hoc committee, the wonderful special task of pickleball and tennis, or pickleball really, as well as the restroom ad hoc commission. And what else would you like to know? That's it. That's probably enough.
Commissioner Armstrong.
Hi, welcome. I'm Travis Armstrong. I've been on the commission, I guess, same 2.5 years as Alan, and I'm interested in the dog park. It's one of my interests, among others.
Commissioner Caldonato.
Hello, Cynthia. My name is Johnny Caldonato. It's a pleasure to have you on board with us. Vicki was a longtime friend of mine, and so any way I can help out, especially with the softball part of things, I'd love to help you there. I'm on the ad hoc committee with Ellen and Jody as far as pickleball, and I'm sure you're going to hear about that a little bit. Also, the naming of fields, Commissioner, myself, and Mr. Armstrong are working together on a committee for that as well. My hobbies, I love to play softball, pickleball, and spending time with my boys. So welcome.
Commissioner Goodman.
Hi, welcome. I'm Ellen Goodman, and I was appointed 2.5, almost 3 years ago. I worked for Palm Springs Unified School District, and I was appointed by the superintendent and the city manager. And shortly after that, the city council moved that position into a voting position, and so I'm excited to be serving. When I first came on, I was on the dog park committee, and I'm currently now on pickleball and tennis and strategic planning. And I just got a new puppy, so dog park is still a big interest.
Thank you, Commissioner Goodman. Commissioner Cohen.
Welcome. Hi. I've been on this commission since about mid-year last year, and I was fortunate to also join the pickleball tennis subcommittee, and recently we formed a hiking subcommittee where I'm happy to serve on that as well. Welcome.
And please introduce yourself. And
All right, so as Commissioner Young had said, my name is Cynthia Alvarado Crawford, and I am delighted to be here in the city of Palm Springs leading the Parks and Recreation Department. We're going to do a lot of great things together, so I'm excited to work with all of you in the community and the staff. So thank you.
anything that we can do, any member can do to help educate, get you comfortable with things, or just support you, please call on us, because everybody here is really, really interested in bettering the parks and working to make sure that your success is our success. So thank you very much. It's time for public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address Parks and Recreation Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Although the Commission values your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Please take 3 minutes to speak on your topic, and please come forward. Make sure the microphone is on, and if you'll sit in the available seat.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wormick. I live in Ascena, and this is the first time I've talked to you. I've come to talk on item number 4, which is dog parks. And just to give you a little background, I work at Ascena. We do have a really absolutely lovely dog park that's both large and retreat. And I wanted to talk about Demuth, the dog park at Demuth. I tried using it. I don't use it anymore because my dog got Giardia there, drinking out of communal bowls without a dog fountain that lets the water go out, like the white fountain that's at CV Link. That would be an example of a fountain that works, and we put those into our dog park to make sure our dogs are safe. But just talking about that, and this is background, when I was in Santa Monica, I was part of a group, probably 1,000 of us in the city, who opened up all of the city parks to dogs, and then opened up 3 off-leash dog parks in the city. And the off-leash dog park in Demuth just isn't attractive. It's hard to sit there. The chairs aren't nice. There's not shade. The water bowl situation bothered me. It's a really small park in an absolutely lovely larger park that I would rather walk my dog in than go into that little enclosure. The city's other 2 dog parks are gorgeous. I take my puppy there, especially if I'm coming down to City Hall. But just in terms of that one, I think the city could do better. However, last summer I lived in La Jolla, and I used a number of the beaches, Wind and Sea, and some of the other beaches that open up until 9 o'clock in the morning, where you can take your dog and you can go off leash. And Demuth seems to me to be a perfect park to do that in. It's not used. I do walk my dog there in the morning, and I also take her off leash on the golf course where you can walk. She walks really nicely along with me off leash. But I think that is a perfect park, and I think when people look at the beauty of Demuth, they really don't want to go in that little enclosure. They want to walk their dog through the park, and to be honest, lots and lots of people have their dog off leash there. They do it really safely, they clean up, and it seems to me that looking at taking the risk as the city of having one park where you allow it to be off leash in the morning until 9 o'clock a.m. would be a really, really great idea. So I'm just raising these issues with you and want to thank you. I want to thank you for the city's other dog park and for the effort you're making to try and open up a second one. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jeff Moore. I'm a full-time resident of Demuth Park, and I'm going to kind of pony up on that. I go to the park every morning, and I did some little graphics. I don't know if you guys want to see them. Sure. I don't know if this has been discussed yet before, but there is no place to sit down in Demuth Park. So you've done a beautiful job putting in the pathways. It's brought a lot of people in. It's wonderful, but the highlighted areas in red are the only places that have benches. And so the majority of the park does not have a place to sit down. And the dog park that's there and that is not very used has 4 cement benches in it that I've never seen anyone sit on. It also has 2 cement picnic tables with 2 benches apiece that I see people sitting at because they like to sit there with their phone in front of them. Mm-hmm. I think a really easy, cheap solution would be to relocate the 4 benches that are in there, strategically place them under shaded trees along the paths so you could walk and sit down and read or do whatever you want to do, and then leave the dog park with the picnic benches and the benches there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We appreciate your ideas. Trees, benches. Any other speakers? Please come forward.
Thank you. I'm Ron Schmeck with Pickleball. I kind of feel bad for my compadres, the ambassador of pickleball for Palm Springs, and that is Dean and Nancy Magoni. A month ago when we had our meeting, we were told we're going to get 4 courts put in at Demuth Park, and they were going to get to use the tennis courts would be just for tennis, which is fine. Well, there's signs there now. They can't play over there anymore. We can't play pickleball over there. And still, we have no pickleball courts, the 4 that we were promised we were going to have. So I feel bad for Dean and Nancy because they put so much work into this, and it feels like they got shot down here. And at one point, they offered $100,000 to give to the city council towards pickleball. Well, that since and the board turned that down. I mean, this is pretty bad. Now, we just like to know: are you really going to do something for us, or are we going to talk all the time? I don't have too long to keep. I don't want to do this every month, come over here and talk to you folks. And I know you realize how busy we are and how bad we need pickleball. I teach over 50 people every week, and sooner or later, we're not going to have no place to go play. And so can you give me an answer when they're going to start this, putting in these other 4 courts over here for us? Anybody, I appreciate it.
No, as I indicated before you sat down, this is a time for public comment, and during public comment, we will receive your comments, but we are really not allowed to make any comments back. You're not allowed to? There will be an item later on the agenda that will address this.
So you will be doing something about it?
Yes, yes.
And then you also mentioned that maybe next year, 16 new courts. Is that still on the table? Well, you said you can't comment on it.
We can't make comments about that.
It would sure help if we knew what you guys were doing besides talking, because I appreciate all your help, you guys.
They're going to address it later
Thank you.
in the meeting when they can speak.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, honey. Anyway, thank you, you guys.
Thank you. Marcus, did you want to come forward and representing city managers and comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Welcome, Cynthia. We're excited to work with you. Apologize for my voice. I'm getting a cold. In response to the last comment, I just want to give you an update. So since the council's direction to us to convert that 3rd court to pickleball, we've reached out to a couple of vendors, including the vendor that did the last resurfacing in 2010, 2013. I don't know, I forget the time frame. One vendor said, no way, no how, you should never convert tennis courts. So we said, okay, thank you. It's been hard to get contractors, they're very busy, but we have a proposal from one and we're moving forward with the process to get a purchase order issued. I don't have a time frame of when they'll actually be able to do the work. The cost is $20-something thousand because they have to resurface the whole court and restripe it. So it's not, it sounds easier than it is, but it's actually a lot of work. So we are moving forward. Things don't go as fast as I would hope, unfortunately. So on the next agenda, you should see, at least it's been submitted, so you should see an item relating to moving forward with David Evans and Associates on conceptual plans for the new pickleball courts that were proposed at Sunrise Park. So we would be utilizing that firm, who's one of our on-call landscape engineering firms, and then so they'll start the process to develop conceptual plans, including the ability to phase the pickleball courts based on funding and additional optional items like seating and lighting and what have you. So we're moving forward on that front as well. That's what I have to share today, unless you have any specific questions.
To me, that's just great news on both fronts that they're being moved forward. I think, I personally, I know that it takes a little while to get contracts out on striping and stuff, and we realize that's the case. I did want to make sure that, I think it's court 1, the leftmost court as you face the 4 courts does get striped back to a tennis court only, because it lives right now with a, I believe it's badminton blend to a court, and we're hoping that could be taken out so that at points in times that court could be totally striped, and we'd end up with 16 courts if there was a competition that staff would be.
It does.
Perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
and there is one other item. Since I'd asked Cynthia to do this since I'm talking, and we're intending to go forward, as is every city in the state, to apply aggressively for projects through the Prop 68 round of funding that's coming out this summer. There's some $250 million, which will go really fast. The grant allows for you to submit one project per park, and the maximum grant you can submit is $8.5 million. So I encourage, we have your prior lists of maintenance issues, so this is beyond that. This is like capital projects for new improvements or renovations that are significant. So I think what I'd ask is perhaps you can submit those to Cynthia, but then there'll be a discussion item at your next commission meeting where you can start to collate and get a consensus of the type of project at each park that you'd want us to submit. I'm going to advocate that we want to submit for Demuth Community Center, the fire life safety upgrades and capital repair improvements that need to be done there, because we need to get the fire sprinklers added to that facility. But I would also argue that the Demuth Community Center is different than Demuth Park. Hopefully the state will see that, will agree with me. So just give some thought to some of the big picture things you would think you'd want to see at each of the parks. Obviously, ADA upgrades of restrooms is a viable project. It's expensive. So it could be anything from that, LED lighting retrofits at the stadium, new or more restrooms, whatever you think is appropriate at the parks. And it will be very competitive. So, we'll try our best. But I'm sure every city will be.
Your department has a very good history, though, of winning.
We do. I mean, we did go after the alternative transportation plan cycle for grant funding. We were not successful, but again, it's a very competitive program because it allows for funding for things that normally aren't funded. Safe routes to school, sidewalks, bike paths, things of that nature. And they had, I don't remember the number, they had 550 applications worth $3 billion throughout the state, and they only had a couple $100 million available. So they only awarded 50-something applications. So I envision Prop 68 will be the same. We just have to be able to identify really viable, sexy projects that have a lot of necessity for our community, and hope for the best. But if you don't ask, you won't have a chance.
Exactly.
So.
Well, I think the other thing to play off of, and we can work with you, I'm pretty sure, Cynthia, you're going to lead us on this, is the fact that while we're only currently at 48,000 people in our community, many of the people travel to this community with their children to enjoy the benefits of the park, for competitions, for swimming competitions and things of that nature. So we're not just hosting the locals, we're hosting a lot of people. And I really want to, get on that piece of it as well, which everything you can do to bring a tear to somebody's eye and a smile, maybe get you that dollar. Any comments, or Commissioner Goodman?
Can you just remind me of the date again that you need to submit that grant? What did you say?
They are still working on the final grant. They had workshops late last year, and they're still developing the final application document. They have the final draft, and I don't believe they've announced yet, but they've kind of tentatively said summer of 2019.
I mean, I ask because I'm wondering if we should maybe carve out some time in our offsite retreat to dive a little deeper. That's one thing. And then the second thing I would ask is if the city could really submit a list of where you think the needs are versus we spend half a day and they don't match. And then what we could do is look at the city's list and, somehow massage what we, some sex appeal into that and how that the two might come together. It might be a more effective work session.
Yep.
And our work session is in March.
Okay.
So we will definitely be working with staff to put a list together to present to you guys. And then we'll be going from there, obviously. Together we'll identify what we will be applying for in that grant application. So we'll definitely make sure that we bring both
Just
ideas.
a question on positioning. Will it actually be the commission that will roll forward the final decision, or will we be presenting to council who will then say, go for these items? I'm not quite sure.
Ultimately, council has to authorize and adopt a resolution, I believe, to submit these applications, but that's why I definitely want to have an action by the Parks and Rec Commission saying, here's what we think you should submit, and, see what they say.
March 2nd, the list.
Oh, I'm sure we can get the list by March 2nd. Yeah. Great. Any questions for Marcus at all?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus.
Well, let's go on to discussion on elections of the chair and the co-chair for Parks and Recreation. Before we open nominations, one of the things that I wanted to make sure everybody understands, this has been a strange year because we weren't allowed to make any changes until now. So what we're actually voting for is a chair and a co-chair who will remain in place until July of 2019. So we're talking about a 6-month stint. That will put us back on the cycle of once-a-year elections that will be driven out then. So if there are no questions or any issues, I'll open the floor to nominations for chair. Commissioner Bowley?
I would like to renominate Les Young for chair for the next year, for the next 6, 8 months, whatever it is.
Thank you. Any other
If it takes a second, I'll second that.
Second. And are there any other nominations? And thank you. I will sit as your chair. I appreciate your confidence in me, and I will continue to serve you as best I can. I guess we do. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Although, when there's no other, do you vote when there's no other named? Okay. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So that becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 and 0. And now nominations for co-chair. I'm embarrassed that Miguel is not here today, so I can't speak on his behalf as to whether or not he is available. But he is serving out his term, which would be, although it is up for question, he believes he is through at the end of this term. Records don't reflect that, and I'd like to have somebody go back and check. We talked to the city clerk's office. We believe he has another year of service. So if we could kind of audit that back and even maybe
Staff will follow up and report back.
looking at minutes. So I would say if anyone chooses to nominate Commissioner Navarro, that is acceptable, but please open the floors.
I will nominate Miguel to continue as vice chair.
And do we have a second? Charles Lamort. And are there any other nominations? We'll close the nominations and we will take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 0. Thank you very much, and I am sure Miguel will appreciate your support. Yeah, exactly.
Don't miss a meeting.
Really? I guess that's a scary way to do things. The second item on the discussion today, on the list today, is a discussion on the opportunity to host the Anaheim Angels, not Angles, exhibition game at Palm Springs Baseball Stadium. Commissioner Boley, could you take that one and explain a little bit about how we got to this concept?
This kind of started back in December when we had the opportunity to attend Breakfast with Santa. That was a wonderful event, I meant to mention, that was put on by the parks staff. Anyway, I was walking around talking with the kids, and I was at one of the craft tables, and someone came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and it's Santa Claus. And you listen when Santa Claus talks. And he said to me, he says, even Santa Claus has a wish list. He says, I would like to see an exhibition game of the Angels at Angel Park here in Palm Springs. Do you think the Parks Department could pull that together? And so we immediately started, I went over to Les and threw it out to him, and then talked with different ones to find out if it was possible to get it going, and talked to Jasmine because that's special events and thought it would be up her alley. And everyone thought it was a good idea. Now we've got to come up with something as time-wise and everything, and with Santa wanting it, maybe we should, we can make it Christmas and whatever it comes up to be.
Christmas, though.
Well, we can't do it, we can make Christmas in July or Christmas, and if we could pull together something, I put out some feelers, and I don't know whether Jackie Autry is still I know she's involved. I don't know whether she's still part owner or what, but she would be a big help to help us get this going. And I'd like to see if we could, as a commission, lead this together and put this an exhibition game together with them.
I think it'd be great. Who would they play an exhibition? Would they be playing against themselves? Would they be playing against not our commissioners? I hope you don't think that was a choice. But
Les, I'm not sure I want to see that. I'll play. But it probably wouldn't go over so good. So that was my question. Who are they going to play? Who else could we get to come out here? Could they play the Palm Springs Power? The college kids? It might be fun for them. It'd be exciting for them. And that was my first thought. If we do it in the summertime, Christmas in July, yada, yada, that's when the Power is playing, so.
However, heat in the summer. Would we get people to come out if it's real hot?
Well, not only the heat, but baseball is a summertime, that's the pastime. They're going to be busy. So it might be a pretty good idea to play baseball in the wintertime.
Would they do
because that's their off-season.
Preseason, like when they start their preseason, could they come out? I'm wondering. Because the Lakers used to use COD gym, et cetera, like that kind of idea. That's my thought.
I'm not sure, but boy, this is screaming out for something that I seem to be notorious for doing, an ad hoc committee.
Oh, Lord.
And only because there's a lot of great ideas, but my thought is, figuring out the right time, figuring out if Jackie Autry could help us with this, and there are probably some powerhouses in town who probably have connections, but also when timing-wise it would be appropriate for the team, and then who the opponents could be. And it could be something as simple as 2 innings against the police, 2 innings against the fire, 2 innings against the school teachers. I mean, there could be some fun things that we could do with that. But I got a sense from Santa Claus that it was about for the community as opposed to attempting to raise funds. But again, I think that's something the committee could put together. So if I may ask for people interested in the committee, I know Commissioner Bowley, that would be a yes for you.
Okay, yes, sir.
Anybody else?
I'm in.
Are you? I would like to join under one condition, that I would be a member of the commission or of the committee and not a lead. So I would like to be part of that. Anybody else? You can always join later.
What does that mean, not a lead? I don't understand that.
Well,
There's
leading-
3 people on a group.
Well, there's always a chair. There's a person that represents the sort of the leadership of it, as you've done for us on several of them. I don't want to be that person just because I am the chair of this. I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't have a chance to lead and pull forward. So,
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
thank you. So, with that being said, Commissioner Bowley, Commissioner Coldonado, and myself will be the ad hoc team, and I am excited about an ad hoc, and I want us to be as good as the restroom committee did. They met, they solved, they closed. So we'll try and do that. They've become my mantra. With that, let's move on to item number 3, which is the discussion of the conflict with CV Link and the golf course. And I think this is Commissioner Lamort.
I did.
You've
I brought
passed us
that.
out some
And
items.
I handed out pictures. It might be just as easy if you look at the pictures. I can describe it. Go to. Well, first of all, does everyone know what CV Link is? Yeah. Okay. And in case you didn't, I did. There is a picture of the CV Link in the packet that I gave you. And if you look at that picture,
Charles, Cynthia might not know about the link.
okay. CV Link, and here's a picture of it. I mean, here, let me give you a packet here. It's a bike, hiking, dog walking, electric wheelchair and golf cart road, actually, that goes all the way from the tram, supposedly supposed to go all the way down to
India.
south, I think it's Indian Wells, that far.
Yeah.
They're in the process of building it. There have been some hiccups because certain communities don't want the roadway through their town because they're afraid it's going to bring people in they don't want. But we do have CV Link already being constructed here in Palm Springs. And the one that I'm suggesting, if you look at the map, if you look at that one where it says Section 2A, and it shows it where CV Link roadway, which is the major line there, is right next to the Tuckwitz Creek Golf Course, which is ours as well. And as I was walking with my dogs up on CV Link, someone was teeing off on the 15th hole, which if you look at these pictures, it'll show you how close the tee is to. In fact, here's the best picture. That's how close it is. So someone's teeing off for a 353-foot, whatever you call it, drive, and so they're banging the ball. And if they hook, if you know golf, if you hook and you hit the ball wrong, it veers to the left. If you slice, it veers to the right. Well, in this situation, if it veers to the left, if they hook, the ball goes right onto the CV Link road. It used to be just a walking path. It used to be dirt and sand. It's the top of the berm, actually, that keeps the Tuckwitz Creek, and I think on the other side is the Palm Springs Creek, within the boundaries. So they can't put vegetation up there to stop it. But what happens now is, as someone hits and the golf ball hooks, it hits the concrete, it picks up more speed, and it just bangs down the concrete. And I've almost been hit by it twice, and I've seen someone hit by a ball once. I mean, none of us were hurt. I mean, we were shocked, but there it is. So I saw it as a safety situation, and I see it as someone might file a litigation if we don't deal with a known safety hazard. And so the pictures that I show are just to give you an idea of how close the CV Link roadway, if you look at this one with the two golf carts on it, that's actually, they're up on the CV Link roadway. And it's right next to the tee. So I saw it as a safety and a litigation issue. And so I made a few contacts, and I was not satisfied with the responses I gave. And so that's why I brought it to the commission as a recommendation to staff. What I did was I talked to the manager of the golf course, and I explained, his name is Brandon, and I mentioned to him what the situation was, and his response initially was, well, maybe we can move the blocks over, the tee blocks, you know, there's two little things in the ground. We can move them a little away from, and I'll have my people do that. I said, well, what about the chance about putting a fence up, putting a net up, which they do in other facilities? He says, well, the net is kind of ugly. I said, well, okay, but we're talking safety here. I also suggested maybe one of the ways to deal with it is to do a dog leg at that hole. Instead of drive it parallel to CV Link, do a dog leg south, and then you head east. Well, he didn't like that idea. He said, oh, that's going to cost all kinds of money. We're going to have to get a consultant. And I said, okay, if money's the issue, we'll see if we can solve it. Basically, I was just getting information and giving ideas out to people. I then called the people at CV Link. It's CVAG, Transportation Committee, is the committee that's handling CV Link. And I talked to a representative there. She's a very nice woman. She says, I live 3 blocks away from, I live in DeMuth Park. And I've been walking on that road for 10 years and never seen it as a problem. I said, yeah, but you didn't have a CV Link then. You didn't have a concrete roadway, which the golf ball is picking up speed. It would hit the dirt and the sand, and it would stop. Well, now it's riveting down CV Link, and I'm afraid someone's going to get hurt by it. And the response was just, I don't really think it's that big of a problem. I said, okay, I'm just on a fact-finding mission. And so I'm bringing it to the commission mainly as a recommendation to staff that I think it's a situation that we should deal with. And I think it has to be done. I think what happened was, who's this commissioner guy calling me up? So I think it has to come from an official source. To try to resolve it.
What I'd like to ask is if you could meet with Cynthia and go to the golf course, and you can actually arrange to grab a cart. I've been out on carts riding the cart. The only thing you have to be careful of is when you're going out to make sure you understand the direction of tees and stuff, because you aren't golfing and you're not going to be following the normal stream. But I would take her out.
To the spot.
Show her the 15th hole, show her, and take a look and see if there's anything else that's in question, because it's not completed there yet. The other thing I would suggest is, once you get a sense of, you know, if there is a solution from a golf perspective or from the CV Link perspective, it may just be a funding issue, and maybe the CV Link can pay for something that the golf club could do. But we do have a representative on CVAG's transportation. I believe it's City Council Member Middleton, if I'm not mistaken. But whomever the individual is probably the person that should be doing the touch point to the committee, and that might be helpful.
Sure, well, just to let you know, I brought this to Councilperson Middleton first.
Okay.
And she's the one that suggested that I bring it here.
Perfect.
So she is aware of it.
Perfect.
And you're right, she is the CV Link person.
Commissioner Bowley?
Along that, I ride my bike on the CV Link from Vistachino down to Ramon. It goes along Cimarron. And the exact same situation happens there. Perhaps we should check with Cimarron and see if they have any suggestions, anyone has commented about it, or anything that they're planning to do. I believe there was two places. First of all, as I'm riding my bike, I'm thinking, wow, what a beautiful thing to ride along the golf course and see all this. I'd hate to see a fence really myself, because it would block the beautiful view of that. But they do have two tees right along at Cimarron also on CV Link. So I think if we get feedback from them, it might be good.
I'm not
So-
sure where Cimarron is. Where is it?
Cathedral City between
Mike's.
Ramon, just off Ramon,
Landown Ramon.
north of Ramon. and north
Is that
side.
still Palm Springs, or is that into
Cathedral City.
Got it.
So is this a Parks and Rec situation, or is this a CV Link situation? Because I know Brandon and Martine, and that's actually Erica
all the
Felci.
people,
So I know
yeah.
all these people. Played the golf course, been there. You're right, it is dangerous, but is that a Parks and Rec?
It is our facility. We do lease it to Brandon's company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Both
Okay.
golf courses are part and parcel of the city, and they fall under us.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I think
Commissioner
I think on the heels of what Johnny just said, is it a Parks and Rec thing? I think the question is should someone be hit on CV Link, who's responsible? Like, who gets sued? And Rancho Mirage felt very, very strongly about not having CV Link go through golf courses and go through certain communities. There were just too many variables and too many unknowns, and so they haven't moved forward with their decision. So I think the real question is, who's actually at risk here? And if it is the city, is it Parks and Recs Department? Yeah, where's that risk and liability? Then I think you can find out what department inside the city is responsible for it.
Well, if I might answer that, Brandon told me, who was the manager of the golf course, he kind of pushed the idea aside. He says, well, we're not responsible for that anyway, because CV Link has agreed to take all liability for anything that happens because of their building CV Link. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's his understanding of it.
It wouldn't stop anybody from going after the city, though. So we
Right.
would be exposed to litigation.
And I think it goes back to what he said, because this has been a big conversation since CV Link began. And so it would behoove the city to somehow be released. And yes, people will sue everybody involved. But who does it boil down to, and where's the release of that liability? And that's unknown. I have no idea.
As I said, all I know is what he told me, but I'm not sure.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yeah, I really think before we get into speculating the commissioner staff about liability, maybe we should talk or refer this to the city attorneys. Golf courses have their own body of law and with liability, and I think we're all just speculating right now.
I think you're absolutely right. I think if you work with Cynthia to show her the space, then you can document it for both City Councilwoman Middleton and Eddie Kotkin, the city attorney, so that we're bringing the item forward. We're not resolvers in this case, but I am concerned that something originating on one of our parks could hurt somebody. And right now, those places are not as highly occupied as they're going to be once electronic vehicles start going and bicycles and having been on I think it was the 9th hole of a golf course recently where there was an opportunity to win a Lexus. Nobody got near that hole in one, but there were a lot of errant balls going all over the place. So I'd rather play pickleball or tennis any day. All right, I think we've got the right action on that one, and thank you for that comment to Commissioner Armstrong. Sometimes you bring us back to the safety check. Moving along to item number 4, discussion on dog parks, conditions and concerns.
I brought that.
Commissioner Goodman, please take it.
Yes, and I actually had asked that Stacy attend, so we can get an update on the large dog park at Demuth and the conditions there. So I'm not really sure if we have any current information, how that's going and the usage. And we heard from public comments today that it sounds like the small park near the shelter, animal shelter, has some growing concerns. So I have some growing concerns about that, and that's why I wanted to put on the agenda the small dog park and then the newly established temporary larger dog park. And one of the things that I was wondering is, would it be possible for the city to move from dirt, which is the large dog park at Demuth was established as a very kind of raw space with the cement benches. I don't know if there's water there. I'm not really sure what the waste, situation is. But it was temporary as they were reseeding and things were closed down. And what I noticed when I go into the park is there's very little use in that large dog park because of the dirt, and that people are using the softball fields and they're using other areas of the park for off-leash. And I think there's some really simple solutions like sand or very small pebbles or grains. I'm a big fan of sand, and I think we don't have enough wind, especially in the south side of town, for it to be a huge disruption, but something other than the dirt. I do think that even though big dogs can run around in dirt and big dogs don't care that it's dirt, the owners care that it's dirt. And we've had quite a bit of rain this season, and that dirt turns to mud. So I think there's some simple solutions for the larger dog park if we could look at that and maybe have Stacy in that conversation, what her thoughts are.
I'll connect with Stacy and bring her your concerns and see what options she could give us in regards to the type of material that we could use in that area.
Yeah, I think something really simple, because otherwise we're actually going to decrease. I mean, we won't increase the use, and I think there's a real draw for that. And then going back to the public comment today on the small dog park and water bowls, and I mean, the city manages that small dog park, and either we have to provide some services there for that small dog park, and we've talked about it before, we get rid of the small dog park.
So a couple things. I have had complaints about trash in the large dog park at Demuth, and Stacy and staff have gone through and removed it. Apparently somebody thought that this was a great place to drive up and dump from a project that was done at a house. There was broken glass, there was a lot of stuff. So that's all been removed. The one thing I'm a little concerned about is there's the small dog park, which sits in front of the pickleball courts and very close to the dog shelter, has always been perceived to be the dog shelters park, or the animal shelters park, that is occasionally used when we're reseeding. So I'm wondering if city staff is doing much of any maintaining of that park, or if that's perceived to be done by the animal shelter. We shouldn't assume that they are. We should take it over. The other thing that did come up recently was dog fountains. Stacy called me and asked, did we address dog fountains at all? And that came up during the restroom reconfiguration meeting, and we agreed that there would be dog fountains associated with fountains in the redo of the bathrooms. I don't know if that went into, though, freestanding parks. It would happen at the city dog park because there is no bathroom there, and we're talking about building a bathroom there. But the large dog park at Demuth, that wasn't a step in, nor where the gentleman was talking about in the small dog park. So I think we're going to need to look at that as well, but just to make sure that where we expect dogs to be free and loose, that we have safe conditions for them. So if we can have staff, Cynthia, take a look at that. Commissioner Caldonado.
One of the other issues that we were talking about, and Cynthia, this is kind of for you, was I play on those fields, and that's field 7. I've put a ball out there myself, and a lot of the guys I play ball with hit balls over into that park. We're going to have to put a net. It's been okay so far, but we're going to have to put up something, because if we're going to let dogs run around, there's going to have to be some kind of net. It's not going to be very costly, but
Outfield of seven?
Field 7.
Field
Yeah.
7.
And not the whole outfield, but just
The
I
direction.
would say left center to right center to right field.
Or could we just change the direction of the field? Just kidding. I'm just
We could
kidding.
go for
I just,
a new field.
Make it a dog leg, right?
there you go.
And what was the area you said you'd like us to look at?
It's going to be right along the first base line, all the way to right field to center right.
But I think we
Just-
talked about netting the dog park and not the field, so that there was some sort of safety net. And
Yeah.
we were waiting to see about usage and what concerns came up around the dog park, and to see if we could
That's
really
right.
establish that as a second alternative, which I think we can establish it as a second alternative if we really just look at the condition of it and what we might be able to do to slightly modify it to increase use. So not netting the field,
Yeah, not
but
netting the
netting
field,
the area around the dog park to protect it from the balls that would go over.
When we talk about that, let me ask a question. Is there an issue with anything on the golf course side? Because that's the other side of that dog park. Are any of the tees aimed at that area?
Well, right behind, I don't know if 7, is that the one that's the furthest west? Often.
No, it's the
Furthest
east.
west, that's 8.
Okay. I have seen often 7, or 8 rather, the balls are going into the golf course. And so there's people, actually I've seen outfielders over there on the other side of the fence. So there is kind of a conflict, but I mean, I've never seen anybody complain.
Okay.
Did you have a comment on the dog
Yeah, I
park?
had one other comment. I've been asked to advocate for designating a portion of larger parks, and I'm thinking Duluth specifically, as off-lead in the morning between sunrise and 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Mainly because the parks are not really used a lot during the week that early in the morning. They certainly are on the weekend because the soccer folks are there. And I've talked to certain people, they do it in Santa Cruz, they do it in Mill Valley, and they do it in Santa Clara, and they do it in Santa Barbara. And different parks that are, where there are huge open fields, they do allow people to have their dogs off-lead early in the morning, between 6 and 9. And so I would suggest that maybe we look at that.
I would say that we've talked about that several times, and the last time we entertained Officer Tisdale and Captain, I think then Lieutenant Kovaloff, who's now Captain Kovaloff, who was responsible for the officers serving, and there was a resounding no. No off-leash areas should be unbounded because of the opportunity for accidents with children or accidents with the streets, and that area around Duluth is not an area where people drive 10 miles an hour. And I would say it would be worrisome to me for us to say not a problem. I realize that at the ocean, a wave can take your dog away, but I am frightened of it. Commissioner Armstrong?
So on that point, I mean, back in time, I know we did have the police come in, and I raised objections at the time that I felt that was unfair because we never heard the other side about unleashed areas that aren't fenced. I didn't like how the commission had scheduled that and what happened, not to hear a full picture about that. You know, there are communities all over the country that have these. So Hawaii and Palm Springs, suddenly, are we the only place that is some huge problem when we have them, as my fellow commissioner mentioned, all over California. So the idea that unfenced off-leash spaces is something really bad, There's cases all across the country where they're not. But I think some commissioners just don't like those spaces. But regardless of that, it is a fact that we went to the city council with proposals for unfenced space, off-leash space in Demuth Park, and the council said no. We never had, I believe, restriction on the time, which might be a compromise, but the old council did say no, and I do think there's a bias on this commission against these spaces that are perfectly fine elsewhere in the country.
Commissioner Goodman?
There are many places in the country that don't have off-leash. The police that came in actually said if you had natural boundaries, that would be a great idea and that they would be very for it. And the dog park committee actually went out and took the open spaces that the city owns, the vacant lots and other spaces, and looked at areas that had natural boundaries against the mountains and other places to see if we could really find something, because I do think that there's an interest for a solution. I will say, and this is just my personal experience, we have a population in Palm Springs that if there is not recall and there really isn't good dog management, it is very, very difficult for many of the dog owners to get to their dog in enough time to intervene a situation that could happen. And I have been on the other end of that, where I had a Great Dane who needed to be leashed, and there are people who can't recall their dog in time. And so I really think we have to look at not just how fabulous it is to have off-leash, because I'd love to have an off-leash area for my dog, but really the responsibility of the people to manage their animals that aren't as respectful off-leash as other dogs. And then I will say, and it's not true at Demuth Park, people do not pick up their waste. They don't. They don't pay attention. They're on their phones. They're talking. They're visiting. They're not looking. Their dog goes. And so I do think that there needs to be a consideration for the disposal of those. So there's really two issues on the table, and that is really safety and how responsible people can be with the recall so that it's safe. Demuth Park is very populated, is a very populated community, and people all hours of the morning go for walks and go for strolls. There's more kids in Demuth Park than really anywhere else in our city. And so I think that would be a concern, and I advocate that we find a place by the mountain with a natural barrier and boundary and create an off-leash area that's super, super safe, and people can have that's not as populated as Demuth Park.
Commissioner Boley?
If we can go back to one other area that I would like to get clarified, that dog park, the small dog park that is shared, used by the animal shelter. If I recall back a couple years ago, this was going to be done away with by the city when we had the new dog parks open.
Right.
This was something we were going to end and not have anymore. The animal shelter came and said they wanted to keep it as a get acquainted area for their people. Now, who is responsible? Because from hearing what Kathy said today, it kind of reflects on the Parks Department if it's not kept up. If the animal shelter is responsible, if we're responsible, we do, I think, need to get a definition of that so that we know, and that's something, Cynthia, you'll be learning as you go along, but we can't let it get out of control because it's starting to be, well, you're not doing it here, and it's not, we don't think it's our responsibility, maybe.
Yep, absolutely. Commissioner Armstrong?
Well, two things just to respond. I mean, the issue that we worked on was to have legal spaces for off-leash dogs in the community because it is very common in the rest of the country. But to Commissioner Goodman's point, that actually proves the reason why what we're doing is because people are having their dogs off-leash. So we wanted to create a legal space for the staff and with rules because people are doing it and they're not going to stop doing it. We don't have the way to enforce it. So we were trying to come up with some solution to control this and encourage people to use a certain kind of space. But I want to move on with my comments to these temporary dog parks. And you know, one of the frustrations I have is that, so just so our new director knows, I mean, we open these parks because we have to close our existing one and only dog park, which is probably the most used public park in the city, according to our master plan numbers, which even have only grown because the city closes the dog park 4 to 8 weeks a year for overseeding. I was disappointed that the city closed the parks this time, and I don't remember any discussion before the commission if that was going to happen. The signs just went up. Normally, there's deliberation whether we're going to do this and outreach to the community. That didn't happen, so it was a big shock to a lot of the dog park users. So we created these temporary locations because we're going to have to close the parks again. They were relatively popular, and so we decided we're going to keep them open as another option. The problem has become with the dog park community who don't know this history. Well, why isn't there grass at Duluth? It's a large dog park. What's happening with the small dog park there? So rather than a positive thing, it's become a negative thing because they were never meant to replace our existing dog park. They were meant to be another option that we would keep open. And as I recall the discussion, the city was going to maintain those parks. I did hear from some people at the dog park just a few days ago that the small dog park at Duluth has been blocked. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I was unsure, why it would be locked. So, there is I think we have these parks, people like them, but now they want the same, they have these expectations of how we upkeep the main dog park, which obviously is a problem. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't really have an answer to that, but there's a history of what happened at those parks and why we have them. And to the comment about taking benches away, I think it's always bad to relocate resources from one place to another. People will be back at that big dog park when we reseed. Again, the small dog park in Duluth does have some issues, but it is an alternative for some people. I did want to mention Kathy's comment when she was talking about, walking around Duluth, just to remind people, especially in the small dog park areas, that a number of people who use those areas are elderly people or handicapped people who can't walk around. And that's one reason that our small dog park is so used. Like I say this all the time, but when you leave tonight, go by the small dog park and you probably see 20, 25 people there. Many of them are elderly people who can't walk around, and this is one of their only places they can even go and socialize. So I think that, I don't know if it's really educating people, how we have these parks, why they're not as they are, but people do seem to expect better care of them now. So they're, in their own way, they're victim of their own success. But it does just underscore the need for sort of real second dog parks.
Thank you. If we could find out about this being locked, I'm not aware of it, and it'd be interested to hear if that is a result of somebody reporting Giardia, because I could see then trying to do something to make sure that it was cleaned or whatever. But if not, we need to probably find out whose park is it really, and if it's ours, I think we need to do some work because it's in sad shape. Just the fence is kind of wanky, and there's only a single access to it. I worry about people, getting their dog in there and getting it off leash, and 5 dogs in there, and they go to leave with one, and it's a direct access out. So I think there are a couple of problems with that we need to.
So we'll have staff look into that and report back.
Yeah.
Let me make one comment about that. So I live in Duluth Park, so I'm there quite a bit. And
wait, you don't live in Duluth
Park?
Park?
I don't live in the park. Let me rephrase that.
Okay,
You're
thank
right. I live in the community. It's close by, a couple blocks away. Anyway, I do know that the facility, what is that, the shelter, uses that to train dogs. So I see them in there a lot, and then they've got chairs. So I think a lot of people feel that it's theirs. I don't know if they think it's our park. And so I always thought it was their facility to use to help train dogs, and that's what they use.
My understanding is the animal shelter has facilities there. They have a greeting place, a place to share. So I think it's probably nicer to have grass, but let's try and figure out what the intent of that remaining piece. Now I will tell you there used to be a second park attached to it that was for large dogs. That disappeared when a fundraising event was held and nobody worked out an agreement that it would be put back or who would cover the cost of putting it back. So the fencing just disappeared. And that's when we worked on the dirt dog park at the back end. So just for a little history. It is, and I feel bad. I would love to see some DG if somebody has free DG in the city, although last time I looked, it was probably $100 a ton, and we probably need 70 tons, but I think we've beaten that one pretty good. Moving on to item number 5, and that's discussion on the report from the hiking ad hoc subcommittee.
Well, I'd be glad to give a quick report. First, I would say that it was Commissioner Lamort, Commissioner De La Torre, and myself. We had our first meeting. It went well. The good news is that there's no pressing issue or controversy or anything that is a problem that's been brought before us. We're actually just trying to be forward-looking and put this together. Hiking, as we all know, and the reason for creating the subcommittee, is a big resource in Palm Springs, and we want to make sure that it continues to be handled as well as it has been handled, or that we make sure that anything that may be coming down the pike doesn't surprise us. To that end, we have been formed as a public standing committee, and our meeting was properly noticed, and that's why you have such beautiful minutes. If you've had a chance to take a look at them, you'll see. Thank you very much, Janet, and to staff for putting those together. During the meeting, we decided that it might be best to start out as an ad hoc subcommittee rather than a standing subcommittee. It'll give us a little more flexibility, and we didn't think there was the real need to go through as much formality to start, with the idea of revisiting that in a few months to see whether it would make sense to turn it into a standing subcommittee. And the reason for that is hiking trails are probably going to be here for a good long time, have been, and the need for coordinating with other groups will probably be something we'll have to do for the foreseeable future. We decided that with city staff help, we would like to get an inventory of what we mean by the hiking resources in town. So everything from the trails to the signage to the waste receptacles to how people park, those type of things. There are some issues that are somewhat perennial issues that come up around things like dogs being leashed or unleashed, not to try to blend our last agenda item with this one. And there are issues about how dogs interact with wildlife. The bighorn sheep are out on the trails. We see it all the time. I see dogs off leash all the time right around the bighorn sheep, and there can be issues. So there's nothing at the moment that anybody is bringing up to our attention is a real major problem, but it could be. The trails are getting much more heavily used. I can only tell you that anecdotally, but from somebody who's on the trails several times a week. Around the holidays this year, there was no place to park to get onto some of the trails, which is kind of stunning. To give you, for instance, if you know the Garston Trail, the cul-de-sac right there, people were parked way into Murray Canyon Road and other places. And I typically, if there's a lot of people, I might see 10 people on that trail. We saw 60. So that's what's going on with the trails. It's great, and people should use them. It's a wonderful resource. And at 60, it's not as if it's overrun and overused. But if I lived right around there, I might start getting upset if that was the regular parking happening right outside my house, and we might begin to hear more about that. There's good signage. I don't know who owns it, who takes care of it. There's been some vandalism of the signage. I don't know whose responsibility it might be to help pay for fixing it. The city does a pretty good job of managing the trash and trash cans and collecting it. There is signage around, somebody wave. There is signage around dogs, and there are waste bags and asking people to pick up after their dogs. People don't, as you might imagine. So there's waste either on the trail, or people go to the trouble of bagging it and then leave it simply on the trail, What I'm telling you is not going to be a surprise. It's just that these are the kinds of things that are out there. There are hiking clubs as we had at one of our previous meetings that came to see us. There is the tribe that does a fantastic job of coordinating with us. There are groups that actually, whether they're comprised of AmeriCorps type of volunteers, or there's actually a gentleman who I've met several times who's hired by the equestrian groups to help maintain those trails. He actually helped to build them 40 years ago. We just want to find out what it is, because right now it's a big unknown. And we don't even know who at the city we would if somebody had an issue, who would you even speak with? So we're just talking about organizing this, Commissioner. Yes.
Do we even know if they're city trails or county trails?
Good question. So it's one of the questions that we asked is, when we get an inventory, can we find out on whose land are the different trails? And some of that has even changed, even just in the last year or two. Last year, I believe the city finished an agreement where they traded land with the Indians and also the Bureau of Land Management. So it's a good question. What is it? Who owns it? And what is it? And again, we're doing this kind of proactively rather than trying to respond to anything. I think it's a fantastic resource. It's great. I believe it probably brings a lot of tourism and interest to people who want to come to Palm Springs and do something besides mid-century architecture. They want to get out and see the city. We take people all the time. Probably hundreds of people a year, just personally, we take on the trails. So we just want, I have a great interest in it, obviously, and we'd love just to bring that to you. And the good news is there's nothing pressing, there's no urgency, but we'd like to do a good job and represent it as part of the Parks and Recreation.
Is this updated on the website at all? The different hikes and...
There are different pieces of different websites. I don't believe the city maintains anything that is an inventory and a description, and that's better done privately probably anyway. But again, that's one of the questions we had and what is out there. The one thing that we did do during this meeting that I'll just open it up and we would love to have comment, we wanted to come up with a mission statement, because we also saw there could be a danger that just because we exist now, people will come up and use us as a potential venue for their own purposes, such as Oswit Canyon and the development that was proposed there. And there's a huge organized group that doesn't want anything there, and it's around hiking and things like that. So we wanted to be very clear about what it is that we do or will do. And in the minutes that you saw was actually not captured properly, so I did return an edited copy of the minutes to Janet so that it could be updated. And what I wrote in there, just very simply, the mission would be to advocate and promote the safe and sustainable use of the hiking resources and hiking trails in and around Palm Springs. And keeping it fairly simple, but it also tells you what we don't do, which is we're not here to adjudicate between what should be wild land or undeveloped and developed. That's Planning Commission and other things. We just want to take care of the resources. And we've asked the city to even consider, should we talk about promoting the trails if it's part of the tourism and part of the identity of Palm Springs. And we're trying to figure out the questions before we even come up with any answers. So that's where we are, and that's my briefing to the larger commission.
Well, let me start by saying I will change the type of committee. I had hoped that it would be a full-blown committee and that it would be for an extended, because of the extended period of time. But I think you're right. Until you formulate exactly what you're going to be able to do, I have no problem at all withdrawing that and requesting that the committee be referred to as ad hoc. I realize that changes your need for location for meeting and posting and things of that nature, but people can be updated in your updates here. So I think we're well covered with getting the information out to people. So
thank you.
Absolutely, make
and
that
one
change.
idea that we did have that would require a public posting and handling it as if it was a public meeting is we wanted to make the invitation if people wanted to go out hiking and just understand what the trails look like or what that experience is if you aren't familiar with it, with the understanding that if we got a number of us together, that would constitute a public meeting. So the idea is floating out there, can we do this and how do we do this? And if we did, we could simply post it as a subcommittee meeting, but publicly notice it so that anybody could attend, including as many commissioners as wanted to.
Perfect. Great update. Thank you very much. Any questions, or Commissioner Armstrong?
I have two issues. One, I just want to encourage the committee to talk to the Sustainability Commission. You know, I think I brought this up before. They do have a walkability ad hoc committee who I think either has received a grant or is trying for a grant. And one of the things they are trying to do is look at walkability in the city, but I think linkages to the hiking trails. So I think there's already been some work being done on this issue elsewhere in the city. But I did have a question. I thought that we were directed that we weren't going to have standing committees any longer. And if we are going to go back to standing committees, I'd like some kind of discussion to bring back some of the committees that, like the dog park committee as a standing committee. But I had understood that there was direction from the administration not to have these committees. So I'm just curious. I think it would be great, and I would love to reestablish the dog park standing committee if we can.
I'm not aware of any issues against it, but again, it may have been an overlap because Vicky was gone, and during that meeting, although I believe Marcus was here through the whole meeting and there was no indication. I personally feel that it is unfair to expect an ad hoc committee to carry from year to year and you know, regroup. I would really like to see the use where it makes sense for standing committees. So I will ask that question and find out if I've done something wrong when I assigned it.
Dog Park's a good example.
Yeah, I think it's a
Because
perfect.
it's an ongoing
It's
resource.
ongoing. It's an issue forever. So, can I borrow your pen? Mine just died. Thank you. Ad hoc versus. Any other comments or questions? All right, moving on to the last item, which is discussion and updates on tennis and pickleball and the designation policy and follow-up work with Ruth Hardy and Demuth. I think more than likely Marcus's update met everything that we were looking for, and I'm really excited to see that we're talking about moving things forward as quickly as we are.
Yeah, I just wanted to make note, because it's been a delay, I wouldn't call it a delay, because it has to work through the city's proper procedures. The public is aware that that's going on, and there's also been a couple of missteps. There was a sign posted on Court 3 or Court 2, depending how you look at the courts at Demuth Park, that said, this court for tennis only, the same signs that went up at Ruth Hardy Park. And people just started rolling their eyes saying, you know, okay, what's going on now and how come they're taking away a court? It was a mistake. I brought it to Commissioner Young's attention, and it was removed very quickly. But people are just wondering what was going on. So now we know, we'll be able to spread the word about what's going on. But I would like to also say that I hope this doesn't ever have to become a standing committee. I don't think it's going away anytime soon as an issue, because it's about scarce resources, and we'll be hearing about this more, I think, into the future, and therefore it would be great, as Commissioner Goodman kind of really helped us spearhead the idea of doing more of a full facility for pickleball at Sunrise Park, which of course means we have to get the council to consider it and put it on an agenda and design it and fund it. I'm glad that we'll have there's some movement towards that now, as Marcus told us about. But it is something I think we should probably revisit from time to time, just simply so that the public hears us talking about it and that we haven't forgotten about it.
Absolutely. Commissioner Goodman?
Thank you for that. So on the heels of that, at the last meeting, if we look in the minutes, the commission did ask the city to communicate out to the neighbors, to communicate out to the community where we were at and what that process. And so that might not have been done, and so it would have been maybe as simple as putting up a notice at Ruth Hardy Park and at Demuth saying, you know, this is where we're at. So almost the same report that Marcus gave us could have gone into a little outline or bullet points so that the community constantly is aware of the process. So I think that would be a really great thing if we could put that into place, some sort of announcement. Do you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so as he's reported to us, has that been spoken out loud at a city council meeting?
Well, I don't know about a city council meeting. I can't comment on that.
Yeah, I'm asking that just to all of us sitting here. Is anyone aware of that?
I don't believe so.
Right, and I think the city council gave Marcus a directive, and Marcus is now reporting back to us of his accomplishments in that directive, which it sounds like he's making progress, and the city's moving forward, but the community doesn't know that.
Exactly.
And they won't know it because they're not all attending the city council meeting. So by putting a posting up at Ruth Hardy Park and at DeMuth saying, this is what we're doing and this is where we're at, and, come to a Parks and Recs commission meeting monthly to get updates, I think would just build faith in the community that things are moving along. That's one thing. I think the other thing is what David said, really, really critical, and that is that we continue to move the city along, which I hear from Marcus. There's a commitment, and he's moving, and I, of all people, am very aware of how municipalities and institutions move.
Not very quickly.
Right. And we can continue to move this process along by being at city council. And so I don't think it is a ongoing, I think the ad hoc committee is good. It doesn't have to be a subcommittee, because I think once that's done, we're done. But we can't rest on our laurels, that we really want to shepherd the conversation so that the city continues. At the council meeting, the council members were really ambitious. I mean, at that meeting, they talked about places where there might be funding. There were no obstacles, and there were lots of solutions and ideas. So I think I got the sense that city council is really supportive of this. If I can switch gears really quickly, I wanted to, and this is the ongoing conversation, very briefly, last week, I had a chance to see the chief of police with Les, and I very quickly told him about the Sunrise Park and pickleball. And there's a couple of things around pickleball at Sunrise Park. One is it really fulfills the subcommittee's work that we did on Measure J. And so a year or so ago, actually a year and a half ago, we had a subcommittee based on Measure J's recommendation that we present to Measure J. And there were a couple of issues that Measure J was looking at for the parks. One of them was increasing usage. One of them was safety, right? And another one was of shade and lighting. And when we presented pickleball at Sunrise Park, it actually accomplished all of those topics that were one of the biggest concerns for the city and Measure J and for us as a Parks and Recs Commission. By putting pickleball courts at Sunrise Park, we increase usage, we increase safety, we increase shade, and we increase lighting. And I drive Sunrise every single day. And it just seems like our residents in Sunrise Park continue to grow. And so I really think that that's an impetus and a motivating factor to continue moving this pickleball situation forward. With that said, Measure J meets the third Thursday of every month, and they have 2 opportunities for public comments. They have public comments at the beginning of their meetings, and they also have public comments after their meetings in case you would like to comment on one of their agenda items. And it's probably in our best interest, especially for the pickleball tennis subcommittee or ad hoc committee, to go to Measure J and continue to remind them that putting pickleball courts at Sunrise Park really does accommodate all of the topics that we originally talked about a year and a half ago. So I just wanted to put that out there. When I saw Chief of Police and I mentioned it to him, he thought, oh, wow, what a great idea. Not just for safety and increasing usage, it's right next to the Boys and Girls Club. And now we have an opportunity for young people to get involved. And it dawned on me that maybe we should go to one of the police meetings and in public comments present this, the same way they did with 1PS around the lighting and the safety at intersections, that the 1PS presented with the police to Measure J to increase the safety at crosswalks. And that is where Measure J's funding was for the last few years. So bringing city departments together and organizations actually might move this pickleball conversation. And then the other point I would like to have go on record is once Sunrise Park gets converted, at least the space between the library and the Boys and Girls Club, into a pickleball center or area, I would like to see Demuth Park's courts revert to 2 tennis courts and 8 pickleball courts, and that it become a blended park. So we would have a tennis resource, we would have a pickleball resource, and for a community park that is populated and well-used, there'd be a multi-use court. Thank you.
So you moved us into commissioners' comments, and I'll keep you there. I will ask you to make one more comment, though. Do you have any updates or any directive on the retreat? Anything that you wanted to talk about with relative to the retreat?
Well, I think with Marcus' comment around prioritizing park needs for a grant proposal, so I'd like to add that to the agenda. And then we somehow need access to the master plan, because that is a topic. So when our subcommittee can meet, but right now we don't have anything to really talk about. So if we can get a copy of that, and then we'll be able to pull our committee together. Thanks.
Like hard copies? Would everyone like hard copies, or would you just like the link in which you can find it on the city's website?
It's quite large, isn't it?
It is very large.
How about one hard copy?
Okay.
And a link to, and I can send you the subcommittees, the ad hoc committees emails.
Okay. And in addition, I will ensure that Cynthia has the requests that have gone in previous years from Vicki for large projects requesting funds. I'll make sure she has all of those to bring those to the committee.
Perfect. Thank you. And it will be held at Four Seasons at the end of Sunrise in the Lodge on March 2nd at
It's from 9 until 2.
9 until 2, and lunch will be provided and continental breakfast.
Thank you.
Correct? So we need to talk about that.
Cynthia will talk about that.
Commissioner Lamort?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Okay. Commissioner Bowley?
I was just going to add on to what Ellen was talking about at Sunrise. A person came to me this last week or so that they take their child out to the different parks, and they were just going on and on about all the great parks we had. But they were approached by our residents in Sunrise Park. The little girl was approached and given a hard time about using the playground equipment because they were wanting to sit there. So, you know, this is something we've got to look at. The little girl is not, she'd go back, but the parents are apprehensive about going back because the people who stay in the park all the time are telling the kids, no, I'm sitting here, and doesn't get off their swings.
Absolutely. Commissioner Diaz?
2 things. The Bristow Park, that little tiny sliver, that one, people continue to speak to me about some homeless folks in there and the use of drugs and other things that are going on in the daylight most of the time. It's a huge safety issue, and there's an apartment, a low-income or low-cost apartment, whatever you call it. Section, whatever it is, right there. And so the kids, you know, they don't go over there to use whatever little park there is there, and it's an issue. And I had one other thing, but it went out on me. It'll come back.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Just one thing, because Johnny brought this up earlier, we do have this subcommittee on the naming of parks to come up with a policy. So when we get requests from the community, you know, we can go and look at what our policy is. And so we haven't really done much with Vicki leaving and everything, and it's Carolina and you and me, and maybe the best thing to do, maybe to have a meeting with our new director to give us some guidance. Might be a way to get us going. I do know that sustainability is eager for us to have a policy because they would like to name something after somebody. So now that we have a director, we probably need to.
If I could ask you to also look at, I just walked between the tennis courts in Ruth Hardy Park and looked up at a sign of a gentleman who this tennis court has been attributed to. And people are just hanging things themselves. And so this is not city-based. But I think we should be taking a look at what things have been sort of, I don't know if they're naming it for him or just recognize him, but I don't want to take that recognition away from somebody, but we have to have a program, and that's what the subcommittee is doing. So I'm looking forward to action on that as soon as is reasonable. Thank you very much. Commissioner Coldonado?
Great meeting today. It's good to see everybody, so welcome. Hopefully 2019 is going to be fantastic. Welcome, Cynthia. So anything that I can do to help you and make your job a little bit easier. I've been blessed to be out here a long time. I know a lot of people, and whatever I can do to help. And that's about it.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Commissioner Goodman, you were done? Commissioner Cohen?
The only thing I'd like to add is, as part of our retreat and looking at the master plan, one of the reasons we thought it would be good to go and make sure that we're just an ad hoc committee for hiking is we wanted to make sure that we understood the context where we kind of sit in the whole master plan as well. So we thought it wouldn't be appropriate to really understand what we need to do as a subcommittee until we had the benefit of going through that process with all the other commissioners. And then one other thing I'd like to mention, there are other city parks, much like Jody's mentioned around Baristo Park, that may not get their due because we don't hear from people. And I'll just mention, for instance, Victoria Park or Desert Highland Park. And there are probably opportunities there, whether they might be for a small dog park or simply because the voices in those neighborhoods might feel a little disenfranchised at times. I'd like to make sure we take a look at those needs as well as part of the master plan and our retreat.
Commissioner Diaz?
I was at Desert Highland, James O. Jesse Desert Highland Unity Park. We had the City of Palm Springs Black History Committee hosted our first Black History Month event. We did the Gospel Fest in the park on Sunday, yesterday. And we used the new outdoor amphitheater stage there in the park, which was fabulous, and it was a beautiful day. However, as they're singing and performing, we're facing the mountain, which means the sun is directly. You couldn't see them because the sun just, and you know how it is. You wait for time to tick down, and the audience. And when it finally hit the mountain, we were done with the performance. But that was just, it was beautiful, and it's lovely out there. But that was interesting. I guess we didn't think about that when we put that in.
And that's merely a stage.
They put in a concrete. They put in that concrete pad. There's stairs, a couple steps going down. The field itself, where we drag chairs to and things, is a hot mess. But that's a beautiful, they built it and they put the rocks behind it between the parking lot and the grass, the baseball field area there. Anyway, it was lovely. And are we on Black History Month parade? Have we?
Actually, yeah. I thought Commissioner Navarro was going to be leading that, but he's not here today. So I'd asked Commissioner Coldonado if he would work with you and maybe find out who's going to be able to represent Parks and Rec, make sure that we're wearing our shirts, and make arrangements for a vehicle. I know Carol Davis was able to find a vehicle last year through the Jeep
we used
company.
that Jeep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she may be able to help us, but it was literally calling and explaining who we are and what we're doing. We have signage for the vehicles. I know we have signage for 2 vehicles. I won't be riding this year because my commitment was to the police.
And I'm working the check-in at Bristow, and she's out in the street doing her job, but
what's the date, the 23rd?
it's the 23rd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Check-in's at 10, the parade kicks off at 11, and then the town fair begins at noon down there in Francis Stevens Park.
The parade is quick, but the thing that everybody needs to understand is it's the Black History Parade, and that means it's for all of us to learn and celebrate the history. There's a wonderful event that happens at
Francis
Stevens Park.
Town fair. Mm-hmm.
Being part of the community, I have to tell you, that was the first parade I've ever ridden in here in Palm Springs, and it really made me feel like you're part of a commission, you're working on things, and you're reaching out to the community. And afterwards, you walk down the street and somebody says, I remember you, you're from the Parks and Recs Commission, I saw you at the parade. And it really does make you feel like part of this community. So I hope if you can that you will pull together and talk to Johnny and Jody. We'll definitely get a good position because we know somebody who runs the parade or works closely with them, and we've got input. But I think it'd be a great day. Commissioner Lamar.
On that note, I was wondering about if we're going to be, I am going to be in the parade, and I think maybe it's through Jody and Johnny. I was thinking, why don't we get some kids who are using the facilities to go with us, rather than just being a bunch of, pardon the expression, Anglo in a car. I would prefer to be walking on the street with the baseball team or the tennis team or the kids who are going to the different centers, to have it a little more about them as well.
The drill team from Desert Highland, James O'Jesse Desert Highland Unity Center usually marches and does their dance and drill stuff, so we could probably walk with them. I know Catherine Finchie Elementary has a huge turnout. As a school, they march in the parade. I know my school's coming down from DHS. I've got an African-American mentoring group that's gonna, I've got
There's
my
adults.
entrance in my
I mean, there are
backpack.
adult groups that use our facilities in addition to kids. And so, it's not just let's have kids and look like because there are adult programs that are at the Pavilion and Sunrise Park and other things. So maybe we should give that some thought and not just.
Be hard. It's hard to kind of organize that stretched out unless you have contacts, but yeah.
Well, I always recommend that every commissioner go to every event that we have. If you walk into the ballroom dancing or to the yoga and just introduce yourself, the first thing they're going to say is there anything wrong? And then as soon as you say, no, I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for using our facilities, they immediately sweep you onto the floor and try to get you to ballroom dance with them. But it makes people, you do represent the face of the city, and it makes people realize that we do have wonderful programs and that when the city cares about them, they feel really good about what they do. So I like the idea. I was a little worried about the liability of taking control of children and bringing them in with the vehicles and stuff. But if we could get, past that, and they could be in the parade with anybody, but if we could invite pickleball players and tennis players and people who do yoga, it may be too short of notice. It's a month.
So staff would be happy to put a call out of participants, just maybe a flyer at all of our facilities saying the Parks and Rec Commission is participating. We would love for you to join us. And then we'll put some contact information, start gathering some participants. We could also just position you in the parade so that you are kind of surrounded by some of our parks and recreation programs.
What do you think about, I have some good connections with golf carts. I can get a couple golf carts.
I want to ride.
So, I don't know what that entails.
Yeah.
As long as they're delivered to the location that they need to be held at, and, in the time, because they need to be there usually 30 to 45 minutes before the parade so that they get positioned and numbered and everything. I think it'd be
Golf
fine.
carts, that's not a problem. We just want to make sure that we do not have children in golf carts
And
without
that they're
their
charged
parents.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
and that they're
and-
charged
and-
up. We have had that happen as well.
Driving carefully, who knows? Real quickly, one thing I wanted to do is ask about, for the next meeting, adding the issue about seating in Demuth and frankly, maybe our parks in general, because as I look at Demuth, it is pretty vastly empty of seating, but we walk through Ruth Hardy Park every day, and the Wellness Park has got seating throughout, but Ruth Hardy really doesn't. That may be something,
They just have a couple of those concrete picnic tables with the benches built
Yeah.
in. They do have a few
but I do think
throughout
about,
Ruth Hardy.
somebody mentioned seniors walking and just needing a place to park it for a few minutes and gather themselves. And it is a public park. Maybe those are things that we could be looking at. So if we could add that to the agenda for next time, I would appreciate it. And I think that's everything I have on my notes. Turning it over to you, Cynthia, for any comments or any issues or things that you want to bring forward.
So I haven't gotten to look at the department's mission statement. I'm hoping to get my hands on that this week, but maybe depending on what that looks like, maybe we can talk about it at your guys' planning meeting in March to kind of maybe revamp it and bring it up to date if we need to.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have.
With that being said, I want to thank you guys for putting your faith in me to reelect me for another 6 or 7 months. And I appreciate working with you all, and I look forward to continuing to do so. We will adjourn the Parks and Recreation Commission to the next regular meeting, which is scheduled for February 25th at 4:30 here in this room. Thank you.
Thanks.